Hello, my fellow readers. It's iDarkSymphony777 with another fanfiction review. As always, a link to the story will be in the description below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, click on that bell for notifications, leave a comment in the comment section below on your thoughts of the story, and finally, this is my opinion. My opinion is not indicative of everyone in the world, so please respect that. So, the story I am doing a review of today is Castlevania Refrain of Darkness by Ihelman. I think that's how you pronounce it. It is a Castlevania and Kingdom Hearts crossover, and it's going into this. I didn't know what to expect. Not so much from the Kingdom Hearts side, it's like, okay, standard Kingdom Hearts side, but from specifically the Castlevania side. Because as far as I know, Weast, that's supposedly like how you actually pronounce this name. Weast. That's how I heard it. He's not exactly a popular Belmont because he's not unga bunga big guy. He's more just flowery magician who just happens to have a whip. It's like, I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know where Dracula is, but I have spells and I know how to use them. That's basically Weast's whole shtick. So, what is the plot about? Well, Castlevania Refrain of Darkness, you have to. No, I'll say that for later when I have to talk about the big plot hole this story has. This story takes place sometime after the events of Kingdom Hearts 3. Aqua received a missive for a mission in this far off in the distance world that Heartless actually don't go to, which is the Castlevania world. The reason why she's going there is because randomly the Heartless just are showing up there. They have like no idea what's exactly going on. It's like so this world doesn't collect hearts, right? Yes. But Heartless are showing up there. Yes. That's exactly why we're sending you there. So Aqua goes, runs into Weast, who is actually fighting the Heartless, and they both agree that, hey, these things are pretty much evil. Let's work together. Oh, let's also check Dracula's castle, because where else would they probably be hanging out at? And the story basically follows that path. Now, when it comes to the actual overall nitty-gritty of this specific plot, this is one of those stories that doesn't really need a deep plot. Basically, what you see is what you get. Aqua just ends up in the world, runs into Weast. They both agree Dracula probably has something to do with it, despite the fact Aqua never heard of Dracula before, outside of Vlad the Third, which apparently existed in this version too. That's actually kind of a weird anachronism, because if you don't know, Dracula was actually based off Vlad the Impaler, and this universe, this version of story actually has both the Castlevania Dracula and Vlad the Third Dracula, which is weird, like really really weird. That Dracula's not involved. It's just Castlevania Dracula involved. It's just a weird. It's just a really weird timeline thing. And going back to the plot, and they just basically travel through Castle Dracula, trying to figure out who's some of the Heartless here, and then just trying to stop Dracula. Because of course Dracula has to be involved in the whole thing. Dracula's castle's up, of course. I guess you gotta be like, oh, I'm here. Oh no, I'm dead now. I'll be back in about 50 years. It's 100 years. 100 years! And that's more or less the plot. It doesn't really get too deep into the intricacies of the plot. No. What this story is a conversation piece. Instead of a deep, complicated, convoluted, really well-written plot, the story is basically just a backdrop to do character examinations, specifically between Aqua and Whist, because among every single one across these two worlds, these ones kind of like are very similar in their function, because out of the birth by sleep group, Aqua is the very magician one. She's mainly the spell casting. She's very flexible, very maneuverable, stuff like that. While with the Belmonts, Whist is pretty much the same way. Instead of taking more after, say, someone like Simon or Leon or even Richter, who Whist is actually Richter's father canonically. Uh, Whist actually takes more on the Belnata side of the family, which are more magicians. If you actually play Harmony of Dissonance, spoiler, I actually haven't played Harmony of Dissonance, despite the fact I actually have the game on Steam. I don't actually have played it, which I need to get to. Beast is very maneuverable. He's very speedy. He's a magician. He doesn't really use the whip that much. He kind of just he only uses the whip because he's a Belmont, and so it's like, these two have a lot of similarities. Let's just have them talk and just have them get to know each other. That's basically what the story is. It's just large swaths of each chapter is filled with nothing more than basically getting examinations of Whist and Aqua and how they compare with each other, as well as how well they contrast with each other. Because they do have a lot of differences, but they also have a lot of similarities. And I like these types of stories. And instead, they don't really that the plot is basically just is literally just a backdrop for all these conversations to happen. And the conversations range from to a lot of different topics. They actually range from religion to sexuality, to the backstories of both Kingdom Hearts and Castlevania. There's a lot. There is a lot to digest if you're fans of lore, and the attention to detail on the lore for both Castlevania and Kingdom Hearts is actually really well done. I'm more of a Castlevania fan, so it's like I really appreciate how much lore you're able to squeeze out. Even like referencing Sonya Belmont, not really name dropping her, but it's like, oh, Trevor was a vampire. Maybe it was a rumor. Which, if you actually know of the backstory of Sonya Belmont and her timeline, basically her and Alucard basically had Trevor, and had Trevor as a baby, and he's like, oh, he's like a vampire, that sort of thing. So even like the random reference to Sonya Belmont was like a really neat Easter egg. If you know, you know. Uh, this story even has like a very creative take of referencing game elements. It's like I'm always been iffy on incorporating game mechanics and game elements into stories, because most of the time they're usually not done well. If they're done well, you can immediately tell they're done well. This one takes a weird approach to that, where instead of incorporating game mechanics and game elements into the story, it's actually built into the conversation pieces, and more or less just used as like jokes for them to like poke fun at like the weird mechanics of both franchises. Like when we said talks about the hearts you get across all the Castlevania games, they use it to power uh to heal up your magic. He basically wipes it away by saying, "Oh yeah, Dracula's castle is like so full of magic that it actually just leaks into like objects, and you can break the objects, and like parts of the magic will just coalesce into these little hearts, and they drop, and you can just repair your magic that way." It's on paper that would seem like a really stupid idea, but in execution, as like a quick like a throwaway gag to kind of highlight the absurdities of some of the elements, that was actually really well done. It's like, and even Luis is like, don't explain how that happens. It just does. And even like they do the money gag, like some enemies and like the Metroidvanias, you can actually hit them and they drop money. It's like, well, you get coins here. Don't do. You can do it from the magic. You can do it for the candles too, but they only use it if they know you have like magic. But again, I don't know how it does it. It just happens, and like even Aqua's like, wait a minute, Heartless do the same thing too. Huh? And the story is like full of little Easter eggs like that. It's a it's a story that is a feast for anyone who knows the mechanics and the lore of the respective franchises. This is a story that you need to know the franchises for. Not even for the specific games, the franchises as a whole. If you don't at least have a basic understanding of Kingdom Hearts and Castlevania, 90% of what is said in this story gonna go over your head. That's just how it is. But if you do at least know have a surface understanding, you're gonna get everything and you're just gonna get entertained by how really well done this story is from a conversation point. Uh Characters. This is where this story shines. Aqua and Aqua and Whis, they're really the only two characters. There is a spoiler character later. I'll talk about him later. But this story only has these two as characters. And I really love what the author does with these two characters. They just bounce off each other. They make jokes, they make cracks. They they even come to like actual disagreements. Like probably the most notable one was when they're talking about like early in the story, Whis kind of mentions to Aqua, it's like, "Do you have a love?" It's like, "Why?" Because more than likely, when we get into the castle, we're either gonna run across succubus or an incubus. Spoiler: if they run into an incubus later in the story. Aqua's like, "I don't really have love for someone in that way. I mean, I have Terra, but he's more like a best friend to me." It's like, okay, probably like that. Hmm. Maybe because like only guys can love girls and girls can love guys. Keep in mind, timeline wise, one second. Okay, back. Where did I look? Oh yeah, Weast basically mentions how the people, he doesn't really like the idea of, well, I'll even like despise the idea of like men hating men and well, men loving men and women loving women. Keep in mind, chronologically, at this point in the Castlevania timeline, this Harmony of Dissonance takes place in 1748. So even Aqua's like, oh, I shouldn't tell him about the fact that where I'm from, girls can love girls and guys can love guys, because Aqua also understands not only the religious context, because if you know the Castlevania lore, the Belmonts are heavily connected to Christianity, and I think only like Julius might be like actually tolerant, but then again, Julius is like the Chuck Norris of Castlevania. Yes. If I don't like something, I'll just roundhouse kick it. But also the fact that Aqua would also understand in that specific time frame, the mid 1700s, every religion would be not into that stuff. I think even today, like the only religion that's not really still into that stuff is Islam, I believe. And I think like the only other religions are like mostly are pretty much okay with it, except for like the fundamentalists and extremists. But yeah, Aqua's like, yeah, I, I don't agree with it, but I can understand where he's coming from based on like context clues and all that. It's like, okay, I don't agree with it, but I understand because of the time frame he's from. Like it's a big it's like a big thing in like every religion. And even when they talk about religion, it's like Dweest is like shows that he is somewhat progressive. He's like, oh yeah, I don't care much about other religions, but I won't hate people for believing in those religions. Like because at this time, and also the story also uses like a lot of actual real world history. At this point in time, Romania was actually ruled over by the Ottoman Empire, which was a very heavy Islamic empire. So yeah, it's like, oh, I don't even like even while they're being ruled by an Islamic empire. Jace is like, I don't hate people who are, I don't particularly care that much about the religion, but I won't hate anyone for believing in it. You know, it's a realistic take, and I actually like that idea. The fact that you have these two people that are similar. Like I said, the similar but also different idea for this story, where it's like, oh, and even like there's lots of stuff that Aqua tells Whis about her world, and he's like, huh, huh, huh. Now, I don't like that. I don't like that. And they always seem to come to like understanding that it's just a difference in like worlds and time frames. Because Aqua's probably living in the 21st century, Whis 18th century, hundreds upon hundreds of years between them. And the author uses that idea to kind of get them to come to like some sort of agreement. Like even like I said, even if they don't agree, they understand where each other is coming from, and they're still working together. And I actually like that in like in a real world context. I wish there was more of that. Like, oh, I don't agree with what you have to say, but I understand where you're coming from. I don't hate you for that. I wish we had more of that instead of like, I'm gonna ruin your life because you didn't agree with me that money should go on trees, or there are like million genders, or something stupid like that. I'm just popping stuff off the top of my head. Regardless, Aqua and Weast, for the context they're being used in, is used amazingly, and their whole shtick of bouncing off one another and engaging in these long conversations, because once the story gets going, literally 90% of each chapter is like just a gigantic conversation regarding any number of topics, and that makes these stories more enjoyable to read. And despite the fact that these stories are actually not popular in fan fiction, surprisingly, hilariously, these are more popular in like actual nonfiction novels and fan fiction. I don't know why. I really don't. But regardless, these characters are really well done, and I have no complaints. Even their flaws are presented under the fact that that makes them more human. Grammar. There is a couple grammar errors, but there is one notable thing. As in chapter 4, I need to actually find it. It's when they get into the castle. Um, try I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to remember where it was. It was in chapter 4 or 5 where the story inadvertently has a section of the later in the chapter appear earlier. I know that for a while that fanfiction actually has that error that happens sometimes where the story just randomly does that whenever you what do you do? Oh, when you upload a doc into the fanfiction file loader, so that way you can upload the chapters. I've heard tales that this sometimes actually just randomly happens. I know I have like a friend who's actually trying to upload stuff, and he's every time he does it, like some kind of weird error happens, and the formatting just gets screwy. This is another example of that. I'm not going to blame the author because more likely this was something more the result of the site itself rather than the author making a mistake. And it is something I think the author should have looked at, or at least came back to it when he looked through it, just to double check. but it's something that most authors probably wouldn't even notice because hey, you're gonna upload it. You made it as good as you can. You upload it. Fucking site glitches out. Copies an entire paragraph and puts it somewhere else. Yeah, I wouldn't blame the author for inadvertently making a mistake like that. That's no. I'm not gonna say that. I'm trying to remember where it was. It's somewhere. It's somewhere either in chapter 2 or chapter 4 or chapter 5. One of them. Pacing wise, the story is really well paced. It gives enough content for each chapter to go long enough for whatever you want to talk, whatever the author wants them to talk about, and suitably end before moving on to the next, before either moving on to a fight or the next chapter. I think that's actually really well done. Most of the chapter breaks are done by sleeping. Usually, when they get to the castle, they usually go to a sanctuary and pass out, and then the next chapter starts when they wake back up. That's nice. That's a nice detail. Like I said, this story is a feast for the eyes if you're a fan of both franchises. You won't get a lot of stuff if you don't, but if you do, it's going to be really good. Uh, would I recommend this story? 100%. In fact, I am actually going to say there's only 2 parts of the story that I don't really like. And that's actually, this is going to lead into what would I fix about the story. The first thing is the fights. Now, again, with that grammar error, I'm going to give the author an L to this. The fights are not really paced correctly because the author decided to constantly cut between Aqua and West out of like nowhere, just constantly, and they're not really that entertaining, but they're there for a purpose to break up the conversation. This is a story that is banking that you need to understand the conversations for, and the fights are meant to separate parts of the conversation in order for them to move on to another topic or something like that. So I understand that there is a purpose. They're not written that well. In fact, honestly, the Dracula fight at the end is just complete dog shit. That has no excuse. The rest of them, at least, the author tries their best to try and make something, but they're meant to be more of a utility. They're meant to be more of a outside, like a weird conversation break in order to edge a conversation along to something new. In that regard, fine, I can forgive that. Except for the Dracula fight. The other issue, and this is the big one, is Marluxia. Why are you in Dracula's castle? Now, normally, I wouldn't be complaining about Marluxia just randomly being in Castlevania because the story does actually foreshadow Marluxia way in advance. Not only to like, if you pay attention, like all the bosses, they all have some kind of connection to Marluxia specifically. 1, 2. Since the Heartless are in a world where the Heartless really logically avoided, and they even in an early conversation was explaining why the Heartlesses are even there, mainly because unlike other worlds where they have hearts, the Castlevania world has souls. So that's why the Heartless are avoiding. So it's like it has to be someone from outside of Castlevania who are bringing the Heartless in. 3, the fact that Heartless, usually when they go inside a world, they usually take like attributes, themes based on the world they're in. So it's like if you're in Agrabah, they take like Arabian style clothing, like the bandits and the fat bandits and stuff like that. But when they're in Castlevania, all the Heartless that are not shadows or the little magic ones are all plant based. You're thinking, wait a minute. 4, one of the bosses is a doppelganger of Aqua, which means it had to be someone that actually met Aqua and interacted with her enough to be able to get DNA. So it has to be someone who Aqua might have ran into. So that narrows it down very narrowly. And finally, when they're halfway through the castle, they notice that there is a plant infestation. There are a lot of plants starting to grow up everywhere. You actually see it earlier, not like very early with the Uni when they notice along the plants. Like, wait a minute, why are there Unis this early? And they even question it. So that kind of leads into the implication that someone has to be associated with Aqua, has and has a connection with plants. Marluxia. Here is the issue. Marluxia should be dead. What? So you're probably confused at where I'm going with this. Here's the thing. This story takes into account canonicity. On the Castlevania side, it takes everything that happened from Lament of Innocence to Harmony of Dissonance as canon. Everything past Harmony of Dissonance, so like the Sorrow games, Order of Ecclesia, the Portrait of Bloodlines, Rondo of Blood, and Castlevania Night, that hasn't happened yet because Harmony of Dissonance takes place in the mid 1700s. Rondo of Blood and Symphony Night take place at like the like 1780s, 1790s. But with Kingdom Hearts, everything that happened canonically, including Marluxia dying in Kingdom Hearts 3. He's dead. So why is he here? Now, if the author had some sort of explanation, I would say, fine. Kingdom Hearts is full of weird shit. It's full of like retconning shit. Like they retconned half of the original Organization 13 to come back alive for like no reason besides retconning it and having no explanation. But this is fan fiction. There should be some sort of explanation. But there's not. There's just nothing. He's just there. And yeah, you could foreshadow it all you want, but it doesn't take away from the fact that canonically, he should not be there. I'm calling it as I see it. This is a plot hole. So there are two fixes that I want. One, give any sort of explanation why Marluxia even showed up there. I don't care what the explanation is. It could be, I just woke up, chose violence, and I went here. It could be anything. Just some sort of explanation. Any sort of explanation. Doesn't matter. Two, fix the fighting. Fix the fights. Three, get rid of that double error. Let's see if I can actually. You know what? I want to actually find it for you. Give me a second. Here we go. I found it right here. Yeah, you can actually see that it actually. So you can see this, and then here. Again, this is probably just an issue on the site itself. I'm not gonna blame the author for what is obviously seems to be just an error. Do I have a favorite part? Yes, actually, I do have a favorite part. It's where Aqua just completely freaks out over Sarah being the vampire killer. Yeah. Aqua's like, oh, can you tell me about the episode? Yeah, sure. And he tells her about the backstory of Leon Belmont and how Sarah basically transferred her soul because she was bitten by Walter and she was turning into a vampire, and there was really no cure at the time in their predicament because they were literally right outside of Walter's castle, so it's like they couldn't really. So if there was a cure, they literally wouldn't be able to get to it in time. So even like Gandalf, he's like, okay, no, Ronaldo, I believe his name was. He's like, okay, so there is a way to kill Walter with the whip, yes, but it needs the soul of light, of being whose soul was mixed with light and darkness. Sarah, yes. I don't think we should. No, Leon, do it. Just do it. It's either I don't want to live in hell because because they're all, since they're Christian, they're all not even Harmony. No, not Harmony. Lamb of the Innocents took place in like the 11th century, so they're like hardcore Christians, and they're like, if I turn into a vampire, I'll never be able to enter heaven. I'm already tainted, so I'm probably never get into heaven. So it's like, I'd rather help you kill Walter to make sure no one else suffers. And so we flash forward to this, when we finally tells what happened, Aqua just starts freaking out. It's like, you're what? You're who knows how many possible ancestors a whip? Huh? What? No. Leon married again, but he never truly loved her. It was an arranged thing. It was like it was hundreds of years back then. Like, but and even like Sarah gets like pissed off and like comes alive and actually tries to hit Aqua. It's like, lay off him. It's a funny thing, but it's a perfect encapsulation of the ideology of they're the same but different, because they both have similar ideology with like souls and hearts and all that. And like Aqua getting like legitimately angry and confused over why Sarah would willingly do this, because in Lamb of Innocence, Sarah basically has to beg Leon to do it, and he really doesn't want to. So she's like, would you rather kill me now when I'm still me, or kill me as a vampire that's literally have to kill you? And he just basically has to like in resignation has to do it, because if he doesn't, then Walter will just eventually kill him, and he'll just keep going on and continuing doing what Walter does, being like an absolute Chad vampire, the Virgin Dracula, the Chad Walter. And just fucking everyone up. So it's like, okay, fine, I gotta do it. Fine. And just basically kill Sarah, and Sarah's soul is now in the vampire killer. It's been there for like hundreds of years. And I like being insulted. She doesn't like Reese possibly getting like attacked, which is why she attacked Aqua, because since Aqua doesn't have a soul, she has a heart. Again, difference but same. So Sarah assumed that Aqua was a demon and tried to attack her. And all that. It was a really nice scene, and I just noticed the story has like 14 reviews. Why does the story have 14 reviews? I want everyone who watches this video, go read this story. Go read it. Go review it. Say how good it is. It's a really good story. I have nothing more to say about this story. It's a really great conversation like story. And it also teaches like the whole idea, like this was made in 2018, and the story, and coming back from 2024, coming back like watching all these people fight and argue in sole decision because my politics, my opinion is valid and the truth, and anyone who disagrees is gonna get their life ruined. It's nice to see a story like this where both main characters can like honestly disagree about stuff but still work together, because they realize, the whole circumstance behind the whole thing is like, yeah, I'm not gonna force this. It's a really nice, solid story. And honestly, this year's top 10 is going to be a really, really tight race. Because there's another story that's probably going to go up there. So there's been Dark Symphony 777, and